Good evening, America. I'm Rachel Maddow, and tonight we begin with breaking news from the Eastern Front that represents one of the most significant tactical breakthroughs Ukraine has achieved in months. Ukrainian forces have successfully penetrated and destroyed what Russian military planners called their iron wall defense system around the strategic city of Lyman. This network of fortifications, minefields, and interlocking defensive positions took Moscow months to construct. Russian commanders confidently proclaimed it would be impenetrable to Ukrainian assault. They were wrong. The elaborate defensive line that Russia built to protect one of its key logistics hubs in eastern Ukraine has been breached. The fortress system that was supposed to demonstrate Russian engineering prowess and defensive capability collapsed in a coordinated Ukrainian operation that combined artillery preparation, armored maneuver, and infantry assault in ways that overcame every layer of the defensive system. This is not just another story about incremental gains measured in meters or the capture of tree lines. This is a comprehensive operational success that has broken through prepared defenses, threatens Russian control of a strategically vital logistics node, and demonstrates Ukrainian ability to conduct complex combined arms operations against fortified positions. The iron wall defense around Lyman incorporated multiple lines of fortifications extending several kilometers in depth. Extensive minefields were supposed to channel any attacking force into pre-registered kill zones covered by artillery and anti-tank weapons. Reinforced concrete bunkers housed command posts and weapons positions. Carefully prepared fields of fire allowed defenders to engage attackers at maximum range while remaining protected from Ukrainian fires. But it all came crashing down. What's unfolding around Lyman represents more than just one successful Ukrainian attack. It's a moment that reveals fundamental truths about the current state of both militaries, about Ukrainian capability to conduct offensive operations that Russian defenses cannot withstand, about Russian inability to hold positions even when given significant time to prepare and fortify them. For weeks, military observers have been watching Ukrainian preparations around Lyman. They noted the movement of forces into assault positions. They observed the stockpiling of ammunition and the positioning of engineering equipment necessary for breaching operations. They speculated about whether Ukraine would attempt a major offensive operation in this sector before winter weather makes such operations more difficult to sustain. Now we have the answer. The Ukrainian operation against the iron wall defenses began several days ago with intensive artillery preparation designed to suppress Russian defensive fires, to destroy observation posts and command nodes that coordinate defensive operations, and to create gaps in the minefield obstacles by detonating mines through concentrated fire. This preparatory phase employed both conventional artillery and Western-supplied precision systems, including HIMARS rockets that struck specific high-value targets identified through reconnaissance. This isn't just a headline about Ukrainian forces advancing in one sector. It's evidence of systematic operational planning at a level that requires coordination across multiple units and capabilities. It demonstrates Ukrainian ability to concentrate sufficient combat power to overcome prepared defenses despite the general shortage of forces that Ukraine faces across hundreds of kilometers of front line. According to Ukrainian commanders who have discussed the operation with media, the breakthrough was achieved through careful synchronization of fires maneuver and engineering support that allowed assault forces to penetrate the defensive system faster than Russian commanders could respond effectively. Let that sink in for a moment. We're talking about Ukrainian forces conducting a deliberate breach of layered defenses that Russian military engineers had months to construct and improve. They achieved penetration in multiple locations simultaneously to prevent Russian forces from concentrating reserves to seal any single breakthrough point. They sustained momentum through the depth of the defensive system rather than becoming fixed in fighting for the forward positions while the main defensive line remained intact. The tactical sophistication required to accomplish this against a defending force that holds significant advantages in artillery and that occupies prepared positions represents a level of military competence that Ukraine has been developing throughout this conflict. And here's where the operational significance becomes clear. Lyman is not simply another small city in eastern Ukraine whose control carries primarily symbolic value. It sits at a critical junction of road and rail lines that Russian forces have been using to supply operations across a broad sector of the front, serving as a logistics hub that enables Russian military activity in surrounding areas. Ukrainian control of Lyman would sever these supply lines, forcing Russian forces to rely on longer and more vulnerable routes to sustain operations in areas that would become increasingly difficult to hold. What makes this Ukrainian success truly extraordinary is not simply that they breached formidable defenses, but the methods they employed and what those methods reveal about how Ukrainian military capabilities have evolved over 18 months of intensive combat. Think about the coordination required to conduct a successful breaching operation against prepared defenses. Artillery fires must suppress enemy weapons at precisely the right times to allow friendly forces to advance while avoiding hitting your own troops. Engineers must create lanes through minefields under fire, marking safe passages and ensuring follow-on forces can move through without being channeled into kill zones. Armored vehicles must advance with infantry support, each element providing mutual protection against different threats while maintaining momentum that prevents defenders from recovering and re-establishing effective resistance. Command and control must function despite enemy jamming and despite the chaos and friction that characterize combat, with commanders making rapid decisions based on incomplete information about enemy dispositions and friendly progress. This didn't happen through luck or because Russian forces simply abandoned their positions without fighting. Multiple sources, including Russian military channels, indicate that defending forces fought for several days attempting to hold the Iron Wall defenses. They inflicted casualties on attacking Ukrainian units. Russian artillery conducted extensive fires trying to disrupt Ukrainian operations. The Ukrainian breakthrough succeeded despite these Russian efforts, demonstrating that preparation, training, and execution overcame the inherent indaniets that defenders in prepared positions normally enjoy over attacking forces. The battle for the Iron Wall defenses around Lyman represents a clear example of offensive operations succeeding against prepared defenses, something that has been relatively rare in this conflict, where defenders generally hold significant advantages due to modern weapons effects and the difficulty of concealing attacking forces from surveillance. But this time, Ukrainian forces demonstrated that with proper planning, adequate resources, and competent execution, breakthrough of prepared defenses remains possible, even in the contemporary operating environment that heavily favors defenders. This success has immediate implications for Russian defensive planning across other sectors, raising questions about whether other defensive positions can be held if Ukraine chooses to mass forces for breaching operations. It forces Russian commanders to consider whether attempting to hold fixed positions may be less viable than conducting mobile defense that trades space for preservation of forces. The psychological impact should not be underestimated either, with Russian soldiers in other defensive sectors now aware that elaborate fortifications do not guarantee security if Ukrainian forces choose to concentrate against them. Now imagine being a Russian commander who has been assuring superiors that the Iron Wall defenses around Lyman were secure, that Ukrainian forces lack the capability to breach them, and that the position could be held indefinitely with the forces allocated to its defense. Imagine watching as Ukrainian forces systematically penetrate every defensive layer, as communications with subordinate units are lost, as reserves committed to counterattack are defeated or bypassed, as the entire defensive system that was supposed to anchor this sector of the front collapses over the course of several days. The weapons and tactics that enabled Ukraine's breakthrough combine capabilities developed domestically with systems provided by Western partners in ways that create effects greater than either could produce independently. Ukrainian artillery, both Soviet legacy systems and Western-supplied pieces, provided the volume and accuracy of fires necessary to suppress Russian defensive positions and to destroy obstacles. Western precision systems, including UMARS, struck high-value targets like command posts and ammunition storage sites that Russian forces believed were protected by distance from front lines. Ukrainian-produced drones provided reconnaissance that identified defensive positions and guided fires onto specific targets. Engineering units employed both traditional breaching techniques and innovative approaches developed through experience in this conflict to create lanes through minefields and obstacles. Infantry and armored forces conducted assault operations with tactical proficiency that reflects training, experience, and the motivation that comes from defending one's homeland against aggression. It is not often that we see breakthrough operations succeed against well-prepared defenses in modern warfare. The historical record from World War I through recent conflicts shows that defenders in fortified positions with modern weapons typically inflict disproportionate casualties on attackers and often succeed in preventing breakthrough even when facing numerically superior forces. The Ukrainian success at Lyman therefore merits serious attention from military professionals, because it demonstrates that breakthrough remains possible when attackers employ proper methods and achieve adequate concentration of combat power at decisive points. Let's be clear that while Ukrainian success in breaching the Iron Wall defenses represents impressive military achievement, we should maintain perspective about what this means for the overall course of the war and avoid overestimating immediate implications. Russian forces retain substantial capabilities in the Donbass region, continue to occupy significant Ukrainian territory, and will attempt to establish new defensive lines to contain Ukrainian advances from the Lyman breakthrough. The tactical success does not automatically translate into operational or strategic transformation, absent Ukrainian ability to exploit the breakthrough with sufficient forces to capitalize on the opportunities created. Ukraine faces continuing challenges in generating and sustaining offensive operations, given manpower constraints, equipment availability, and the need to maintain defensive capabilities across the entire front to prevent Russian advances in other sectors. According to military analysts who have studied the Lyman operation and its initial results, several factors merit particular attention. The successful Ukrainian breaching operation demonstrates that adequate artillery support remains fundamental to enabling maneuver even in an era of precision weapons and advanced technology. The integration of different capabilities through competent command and control proves more decisive than any single weapon system or tactical technique. Intelligence preparation that identifies enemy vulnerabilities and that guides fires and maneuver creates opportunities that cannot be generated through mass or firepower alone. The human costs of this operation deserve acknowledgement amid the operational and strategic analysis. The breaching of prepared defenses inevitably involves casualties among attacking forces who must advance under fire against positions specifically designed to maximize defensive effectiveness. Ukrainian soldiers were killed and wounded while conducting assaults against Russian positions, sacrificing themselves in service of operational objectives that their commanders judged worthy of the costs. Russian defenders also suffered casualties, with many killed or wounded while attempting to hold positions that ultimately could not be sustained, and with others captured when their positions were overrun. The tragedy of war affects soldiers on all sides, regardless of which bears moral and legal responsibility for the conflict's occurrence. During this phase of the war, which has been characterized by largely static front lines and attritional warfare, where territorial changes are minimal despite constant combat and casualties, successful breakthrough operations like the destruction of the Iron Wall defenses at Lyman take on particular significance because they demonstrate that the military situation remains dynamic, despite appearances of stalemate. Both sides continue seeking methods and opportunities for achieving operational effects that might create advantages or alter trajectories. Ukraine has been developing offensive capabilities while conducting active defense across most of the front. Russia has been attempting to improve defensive positions while maintaining pressure through artillery fires and local attacks in selected areas. The Lyman breakthrough suggests that Ukrainian offensive development has reached levels where breakthrough of prepared defenses becomes possible when adequate resources are concentrated. And that raises important questions about sustainability and about trajectories as winter approaches and as both sides consider how operations will evolve through coming months. Ukraine has demonstrated renewed offensive capability but faces challenges in sustaining operations given resource constraints and the need to maintain defenses across the entire front. Russia must decide whether to attempt counterattacks to recover lost positions, whether to establish new defensive lines accepting territorial losses, or whether to consider more fundamental adjustments to force employment given demonstrated vulnerabilities. The international dimension remains critical, with Ukrainian operations depending heavily on Western ammunition and equipment supplies. While Russian ability to regenerate forces and replace losses relies on defense industrial capacity and on economic resources that Western sanctions seek to constrain. The technological and tactical lessons from the Lyman breakthrough will be studied intensively by military professionals attempting to understand implications for doctrine and for planning. The successful breaching operation validates certain principles about concentration of combat power, about synchronization of fires and maneuver, and about importance of engineering support that have characterized military operations throughout modern history. It also demonstrates new dimensions related to reconnaissance and targeting enabled by drones, to precision effects from systems like HIMARS, and to the importance of electronic warfare in both disrupting enemy coordination and in protecting friendly communications. Future defensive planning will need to account for these demonstrated Ukrainian capabilities, requiring greater depth, more redundancy, and more flexible response capabilities than the static linear defenses that proved inadequate at Lyman. For military analysts attempting to draw broader conclusions from Ukrainian success at Lyman, several themes emerge that extend beyond specific tactics to fundamental questions about modern warfare. Prepared defenses remain valuable, but are not impregnable when attackers employ sound methods and achieve adequate force concentration. Artillery continues to play a decisive role, despite advances in precision weapons and despite optimistic predictions that expensive guided munitions would make traditional fires obsolete. Combined arms integration, where different capabilities support each other, remains more important than possession of any particular weapon system, and military effectiveness depends ultimately on training, leadership, and morale rather than simply on quantity of equipment or defensive preparation. The story here extends beyond one successful breakthrough operation to fundamental questions about how this war is evolving, about whether Ukrainian military capabilities have reached levels where offensive operations can achieve meaningful territorial gains, and about whether Russian defenses can prevent Ukrainian advances or whether the front lines may become more fluid with possibilities for significant territorial changes. The destruction of the Iron Wall defenses at Lyman provides one important data point for understanding these broader questions, demonstrating Ukrainian capability while also revealing the costs and challenges involved in conducting offensive operations against prepared defenses. And here's what military experts find most significant about what happened at Lyman. This was not a case of Russian forces abandoning positions without serious resistance or of attackers achieving surprise through some clever deception that caught defenders unprepared. Ukrainian forces succeeded through systematic application of combined arms tactics against defenders who were alert, who fought to hold their positions, and who enjoyed advantages of terrain and fortification. The success demonstrates that Ukrainian military has matured to a level where it can conduct complex operations requiring coordination across multiple domains and capabilities, something that only professional military forces with competent leadership and adequate training can accomplish consistently. This level of military effectiveness, combined with motivation that comes from defending homeland against aggression, creates formidable capability that Russian forces have proven unable to match despite advantages in numbers and resources. This is about more than one city or one defensive line. It's about military capabilities and about trajectories of how forces on both sides are evolving through sustained combat operations. It's about whether Ukraine can generate and sustain offensive operations sufficient to liberate occupied territory, or whether the war settles into prolonged stalemate where neither side can achieve decisive results. It's about whether Russian military can develop effective responses to Ukrainian capabilities and methods, or whether fundamental organizational and cultural limitations prevent adaptation necessary to compete effectively. And ultimately, it's about how wars end when neither side can achieve quick, decisive victory, but when continued fighting imposes costs that eventually become unsustainable for one or both combatants. Something significant happened at Lyman, when Ukrainian forces breached and destroyed defensive system that Russian planners confidently proclaimed was impregnable. The tactical success demonstrates Ukrainian military effectiveness. The operational implications threaten Russian logistics and force positioning. The strategic message suggests that this war remains dynamic despite months of largely static front lines. The destruction of the Iron Wall defenses represents Ukrainian military achievement that merits recognition, while also reminding us that breakthrough operations, however impressive tactically, must be exploited and sustained to generate operational and strategic effects that contribute to eventual conflict resolution. In the wake of Ukrainian forces destroying Russia's Iron Wall defenses and achieving breakthrough at Lyman, the story that emerges is about military competence, about the continuing viability of offensive operations in modern warfare, about Russian inability to hold positions even when given time and resources to prepare them thoroughly, and about possibilities that territorial situations can change even after months of apparent stalemate. The breakthrough at Lyman is one chapter in the much longer story of this war, an important chapter that reveals capabilities and trends, but that must be understood as part of a broader campaign whose ultimate outcome remains uncertain. The concept that elaborate fortifications and defensive preparation guarantee security has been challenged throughout military history, with each era producing examples where determined attackers employing proper methods overcome defenses that appeared impregnable. The Iron Wall defenses at Lyman represent the latest example of this enduring truth. with Ukrainian forces demonstrating that contemporary defenses, regardless of engineering sophistication, can be breached when attackers achieve adequate concentration and employ combined arms tactics that overwhelm defenders through synchronized application of multiple capabilities. Future defensive planning by Russian forces and by militaries studying this conflict will need to account for these demonstrated vulnerabilities. Vulnerability to static linear defenses. I'm Rachel Maddow. And understanding what happened at Lyman matters because it reveals current state of military capabilities on both sides, because it demonstrates that offensive operations remain viable when properly planned and executed, and because it suggests that the territorial situation in this war may be more fluid than months of apparent stalemate would suggest. The destruction of Russia's Iron Wall defenses represents Ukrainian military achievement that has immediate operational implications, and that provides insights into how this war may evolve through coming months as both sides adapt to lessons learned through costly experience. Good night, and stay informed.